Sometimes games of Commander take too long. Sometimes your friends want to play just one more game, and you've only got 45 minutes till the game store closes. In those circumstances, you should have something in your repertoire that helps you to facilitate this. Something that moves the game faster, gets the ball rolling and rolling and rolling till it spirals out of control and it's burning and it's bouncing around the room and it's set fire to someone's cat. Can you smell that? Oh, that's the sound of burning rubber. And I don't mean tires, I mean balls, because in this analogy, the balls are made out of rubber. I'm not talking about testicles either, you pervert. I've had a few of these decks over the years, with my current go-to being Perforos, God of the Forge, or God of the Goblins as I like to call him. It lowers everyone's life totals quite quickly, so the game is over fast. And even if you get eliminated because they think you're a threat, and boy, am I the threat. When I enter a room, I'm assessing everyone in there to make sure I can kill them if I needed to, because I'm a badass. I'm the bad man, the bad wolf that your mum warned you about before she went home and wanked herself silly over me. Anyway, if they kill me, their threat assessment was correct, but the game will end quickly. Wizards of the Coast have printed a few of these in recent times with Torbran. And a little bit later we had Solfim, Mayhem Dominus, both of which are 4-mana, end of the game much quicker commanders. And the latest in that long line of commanders that want to let the world burn, Ojer Axonhil. And yes, reader at home, I'm trying not to pronounce it like an ignorant Brit. I'm trying my best to give it the Spanish or Portuguese speaking intonation and language, because I was asked that in my comments on my last video, so I do try. Ojer is a 4-mana skull-faced chungus with a dinosaur for a hand, which begs the question, does he always wipe his ass with his left hand? In today's video I can't answer that, but we are going to talk relatively in-depth about my first draft of a deck tech and where I would take it. So if you're looking to build a deck, buckle up and let's talk tech. But before that, a message from our sponsor, the sponsor being me. If you like the cut of my jib and jokes about wiping my ass, then why don't you look to give me some money via patreon.com. Patreon is the primary source of my income, and for just $2 a month you can get access to my Discord via Patreon, where I hang out and chat to people about all sorts of shit, even magic sometimes. Higher tier patrons get to hang out with me on a call once per weekend where we talk, again, about all sorts of stuff. Food, geography, sometimes even magic. We hold occasional Magic the Gathering tournaments via Arena or paper proxy via webcam, and Warhammer 40k tournaments via TTS. These are all got prizes out of my own pocket that are exclusively for people who sign up via the Patreon. So hit the link in the description below and give me less than a price of coffee a month to help me do what I do, and get access to the Discord where I hang out and ask people really complicated questions, like judge questions, where people who aren't judges get involved, and I'm like, are you a judge? No? Well, shut the fuck up then. And if you really want, I can neg you on there as well. I can call you all sorts of nasty names like slag and shit bitch. Ojer Axonhil is a red god. A 4-mana 4/4 with trample. It's a legendary creature, so you can be a commander. And if a red source you control would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ojer's power to an opponent, that source deals damage equal to Ojer's power instead. And when it dies, you flip it over. It transforms, tapped, into Temple of Power. Bear in mind, in my preview video talking about Ixalan, I've missed the part that comes back tapped, so we can't actually loop this in a weird way. Shame. Temple of Power is a tapped land. When it transforms, that taps for red. And for 3 mana and tap, you can transform Temple of Power, activate it only if a red source you control has dealt 4 damage or more non-combat damage this turn, and it flips over only as a sorcery. So when he dies, it becomes a land, you deal 4 damage, and that allows you to re-summon him out of the land, out of the temple, when he comes back. So the obvious thing is we're going to do loads of little pings and make it equal to Ojer's power, but we can get a lot cuter than just that. Let's go through it. First of all, always play Jeska's Will and Wheel of Fortune if possible. Hell, proxy them. I think people proxying will make Commander a lot more of a fun experience. You shouldn't have to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get access to stuff in a casual format. These are no-brainers, auto-includes in all red decks, in my opinion. Next up, a public service announcement. This is not Torbran. It only hurts your opponents for bonus damage. If you were to shoot an opponent's creature, the damage is not buffed by Ojer's ability. It's not Torbran. This means certain cards are much better in Torbran and much worse here, and vice versa to an extent. For example, Goblin Sharpshooter is incredible in Torbran because it shoots things for 3 damage, and if it kills them, it untaps itself. I think the card might still be playable here. It hasn't made my first draft, but it's significantly worse because if you're shooting creatures, you're only doing 1 damage. Now, on top of that, of course, we can use effects to make our things like Goblin Sharpshooter do more damage to creatures. Things like Torbran, Mechanized Infantry, and Dictate of the Twin Gods, and other similar doubling enchantments and spells. The problem is that using them to improve the damage you do to opponents' creatures is counterintuitive to Ojer's plan of doing damage to people's faces. When you get to replacement effects or add-on effects that affect a permanent or player, the player or the player controlling that permanent gets to pick them. So if we did Torbran plus Ojer, they get to pick one and then the other. So for example, if it's 1 damage up to 3 thanks to Torbran, it then goes up to 4 from Ojer. It doesn't go up to 4 from Ojer and then 2 from Torbran. The player getting hit by it chooses the effect. And the same applies for doublers as well. They can choose to double a 1 to a 2, and then up to a 4 with Ojer, and then, yeah, basically you're non-synergizing due to the way that these effects get put on by the player being affected. In short, we're not playing those effects. We're playing none of the bonus damage effects. Ojer is really our chief commanding card. For that reason, we're going to be looking to protect Ojer as much as we possibly can. First of all, we've got the obvious things of Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, and of course Darksteel Plate. All 3 of these protect Ojer from being targeted or killed with a destruction effect, allows him to survive through some of our wrath effects too if he's indestructible. Without Ojer, a lot of our cards get a lot worse, so protecting him is very important to enact our game plan. Keep in mind that Lightning Greaves give Shroud though, so you can't target him with your own stuff. And we have a couple of targeted effects, but the main one that I want to mention is Dragon Mantle. It's the only one that I've added at this stage, and I'm assuming that Dragon Mantle, there are other versions of it. This one enters and draws a card, so it replaces itself. It's a small 1-mana enchantment aura that was just printed in Wilds of Eldraine with a cool, like, alternate frame, but the main reason I like Dragon Mantle is that for 1 red mana, we can buff the creature that it's attached to, in this case Ojer, by +1 power, so it's got fire breathing, essentially. What this means is that when we go to attack, or with our and trigger some pings that we're going to come to in a moment, or trigger other effects in our deck, we can pay mana into Ojer to pump his power, and then when we replace the 1 damage with 7, 8, 9, or 10 damage because of Ojer's power, it does huge amounts of damage. Beyond that, the other 2 buffers that I would look at is Loxodon Warhammer and Bone Splitter. Bone Splitter is a cheap 1 mana for 2 power increase with a 1 mana equip. It's incredibly efficient, and Loxodon Warhammer gives us +3/+0, but also gives trample and lifelink. Just keep in mind that whilst we're getting lifelink on our commander here, and he can go to combat and gain us some life somewhere, it doesn't give us a lifelink on the damage of the spells we're doing. Ojer isn't doing the damage. The original effect, the original source is still doing the damage there. And let's talk about some generically good shit. Chandra Awakened Inferno and Defiler of Instinct. Both of these cards are absolutely solid in red decks anyway, with Chandra having targeted removal, a wrath, and an ability to stick pings on people that they can't get rid of. But the pinging ability, those emblems that Chandra makes, now ping for 4 damage every upkeep. 2 of them on 1 player, that's 8 damage in their upkeep if your commander is alive. And then Defiler allows us to cast all of these expensive spells for a little bit less by making each of the red pips in their mana Phyrexian, so we can pay 2 life instead. But Defiler also has a pinging ability strapped to it. Whenever you cast a red permanent spell, Defiler Instant deals 1 damage to any target, and thus, as we slam these enchantments and shit into play, we ping everybody, and thus we do more damage with Ojer, because Ojer turns the ping from 1 into a 4, or in the case of he's Dragon Mantled up and you've tapped a little bit of mana, a 5 or a 6 or a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or a 10. I can keep counting numbers up, but I'm going to stop. And then there's Price of Progress, which is generically good in any burn-based red deck, but it's not in every single red deck in my opinion, and it's not made better by Ojer either. But it would be absolutely silly to talk about burning our opponents out without playing Price of Progress, which is often 2 mana for a minimum of 6 damage. It can be up to 10 damage in the late game to players who've got a mana base full of non-basics. And here's a slot that I haven't given a huge amount of thought to. With Sweepers, we're going to play Blasphemous Act, which is generically just 13 damage to shit. Absolutely fantastic. And if you really want to, you can slide in a Brash Taunter as well, because Brash Taunter plays well with Blasphemous Act. The other one that I was thinking about was Earthquake. Now, Earthquake is generically old school and not incredibly well played anymore. Of course, it's however much money you can dump into it to blow up the world. Or I was thinking with Earthquake, sometimes you can just pop it for 1. So it can be a 2 mana way to ping all 3 players that are currently in play with damage from Ojer, especially if you've buffed his power. And there are a few other cards like that that can do a lot of damage to all your opponents for 1 mana, and End Festivities is one of them. It does 1 damage to each opponent and each creature that planeswalker they control. It's a wide splashing ping, and the reason I really like it is because it just does 1 damage to each player and creature and planeswalker, it says on the tin, so it's buffed by Ojer when hitting players but not planeswalkers. This might be an early cut for me for something a bit more efficient though. And then we come to a mechanic that I love, Retrace. This is a way of giving our spells extra life and recursion and sort of card advantage. The problem with playing a deck where you're playing like spell-based burn in a sense, although we're moving more towards enchantments and permanents, but when we're playing spell-based burns, that our spells are just, you fire it out, you do some damage, and then you're card down. If those cards can generate card advantage, or we can generate card advantage elsewhere, which is difficult in red, then we get to still have resources when we run low in hand. So we're going to play Retrace spells. This is particularly good with any of the creatures that ping off of them, that we'll come to in a moment. Our Retrace spells are Throes of Chaos and Flame Jab. Throes of Chaos is 4 mana, Cascade, so we get to go digging through our deck to find something that costs less than 4 and cast it immediately, which will probably be a burn spell or some sort of punishing effect. And then it has Retrace, so in the later game we can discard a land and pay 4 mana to just cast it again. And when you retrace, you don't exile it from graveyard, you get to just do it again. So it gives us once per turn, we get to 8 mana, twice per turn I guess, the ability to fire off Throes of Chaos. Flame Jab is rather cute. At 1 damage we can shoot someone in the face and trigger Ojer's replacement ability and shoot them for 4, and then discarding a land and paying 1 red allows us to do it again. In the late game, if we draw more cards, perhaps off of raw card advantages like Howling Mine, although I haven't included them in this version of the deck, we could discard multiple lands, paying multiple red mana to shoot people from multiple integers of 4. It seems cute, but that definitely adds up and gives you a big sort of bit of reach at the end of the game if you're out of cards but you're top decking lands. And then looking at recursive spells, let's talk about buyback as well. There are 2 I want to talk about. The first is Haze of Rage, a 2 mana sorcery with buyback 2. So if you pay 2 mana as you cast it extra, you put it back into your hand after resolving. And creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn, and it has Storm. So if you cast it once, you get +1/+0. If you cast it twice, that's 8 mana total, you get +1/+0 and then +1/+0 twice, because it storms off itself, giving you +3/+0. Now remember, this is buffing your commander, Ojer, who's going to make all your spells do more damage, but it's also going to buff all your little gribblies. I think making tokens is probably good in this deck for some cards we're going to come to in a moment. The buyback allows you to trigger all these triggering effects we're coming to, and also just grow Ojer's power to make him a more formidable chunking damage output engine when you're casting your stupid little ping shit. Bear in mind, if you go like Flame Jab, Retrace, Flame Jab, cast Haze of Rage, cast Haze of Rage after the buyback, so that's 1 mana for flat jab, 1 mana for jab, 4 mana for the first brought back Haze, that's 6 mana, 7, 8 mana for the last Haze without buyback, you're getting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, +5, +0. Yeah. And you do the first buyback one first, so it buffs Ojer into a 5, and then each of the flames do 5 damage each, and then you do the Haze of Rage, and you buff your board, and yeah. Seething Anger is a similar effect with buyback without the Storm effect. In essence, it's a 1 mana pump Ojer by 3 to make all your other spells and non-combat damage do an extra 3 damage this turn. But you can buy it back, so you could double up on it if you've got loads and loads of mana, or you can buy it back to use on the following turn as well. It's just another way of making your spells go that little bit further. So let's look at Kessig Flame Breather, Gutter Snipe, Erebor Flamesmith, and Firebrand Archer. All of these cards trigger off of non-creature or spell-based casts, and to be honest, Gutter Snipe's probably the weakest of the lot of them because you're not getting the bonus 1 jump to 4, you're going from 2 to 4, but also it doesn't trigger on your enchantments or your artifacts. Either way, these allow you to play your lock pieces, your Punisher pieces, all the stuff I'm about to come to, your Ank of Mishras, for example, and they're going to ping on the way in and do extra damage off her head. Of course, hands down, the best version of this is Odebrask, the latest one, the 4 mana Flip Praetor, who every time you cast an instant sorcery spell, you do 1 damage to target opponent, so in this case, 4 damage off her head, and you add a red mana to your mana pool, allowing you to do some really crazy turns. Another playoff that I really like is Aria of Flame, which is a 3 mana enchantment that when it enters the battlefield, each opponent gains 10 life. Of course, we're cheating a little bit because we have to get the verse counters up. Each time we trigger it, we're going to do damage off her head. It does give everyone 10 life, but casting 2 instants of sorceries with this in play will undo that damage to 1 player, allow you to focus them down. I'm not convinced I should be including Aria of Flame, but I do still quite like playing it in my spell-based combo decks anyway. And then we come to my favourite part, the Punisher cards. I've already spoken about Ank of Mishra, but what if we included Zozu the Punisher, Rampaging Ferocodon, Cemetery Gatekeeper, Eidolon of the Great Revels, or hell, what about fucking Mana Barbs? All of these effects will punish your opponents for doing different things. Playing lands, playing creatures, creatures entering the battlefield. In the case of Mana Barbs, it's just tapping a land. Let's talk about Mana Barbs the most. Mana Barbs is by far the best one here, and since that it pings every single player every single turn for using the mana, and each 1 damage is now 4 damage because of Ojer. I never said this deck would make you friends. If anything, it's going to piss off your playgroup. This will actually just lock people out of the game where they can't tap their lands for fear of just taking a shit ton of damage. And then we have some combat stuff. Mainly Hellrider. Hellrider is a 4 mana hasting 3/3 that does 1 damage for each creature that's attacking. Each creature generates a ping that pings the opponent in non-combat damage for 1 damage. In this case with Ojer, 4. Attacking with Ojer, a Hellrider, and 1 other creature is going to be a 12 damage ping to someone's face in 3 instances of 4. It's kind of crazy. If we include something like Raid Bombardment, it means every time a creature with power 2 or less, so not your commander, not the Hellrider itself, but all the other gribblies we can play. Each time we attack with them, it does 1 damage to the player or planeswalker they're attacking. Again, the 1 gets buffed. Do you see where I'm going with this? For that reason, we slam in Goblin Rabble Master and Legion Warboss, 2 creatures that make a load of bodies slowly but surely, each one being able to trigger us our Hellrider or Raid Bombardment when going to combat. And because of that, we add 2 of my favorite cards of all time, Impact Tremors and Perforate Perforos, God of the Forge. So as they enter, they ping your opponents for 1 in the case of impact tremors and for 2 in the case of Perforos. Or if Ojer is in play, it's just a big old thick 4 damage, unless we've buffed him. Unless he's got a fucking dragon mantle on, then that means you go to combat, make a 1-1, buff him up to a 10-10 and just shoot everyone for 10. And because of all this, I think that young Pyromancer is probably a good include if you're going heavy on the spell-based side. I only ended up with like 10 to 12 spells in my deck. I was playing a lot more enchantments and artifacts, so young PZ might get cut from my version of the deck. But if you're playing Impact Tremors and Perforos and Herald Rider and Raven Barman, making these little 1-1s that will be able to trigger all of this stuff is pretty strong. And it just gives you good blockers too when they inevitably come hunting you down for a fist fight. And then we've got 2 more generically good cards that all red decks probably should play. Not quite as good as Jeska's will, but close. Actually, one of them is better. But both of those also trigger a pet card for the deck. Descent into Avernus should be in every red deck there ever was, ever. The card speeds up games and is just generally enjoyable for everyone to play with. Meanwhile, Dockside Extortionist should never have been printed and should never have existed, but it does. But at ATBs, you're going to get some number of treasures. People often tell me in casual levels of Commander, you're not going to get that many treasures. But if you make 2 treasures off this, you're up on mana. And then if you've got a Reckless Fireweaver in play, each of those treasures is pinging your opponents for some damage, and thus being replaced with Ojer and doing a ton of damage. I actually think Reckless Fireweaver isn't as pet card for this deck as I claim. I think a lot of decks that are going to make a lot of artifacts, I play in Shahira for example, will play Reckless Fireweaver. This is not secret tech, but it's really good here. And then we come to our final category before we go on to the MVP of the deck. Our final category is tappers, or pingers should I say. Brimstone Trebuchet, Chandra Fire of Kaladesh, and Thermo Alchemist are all cards that tap to ping 1 damage to an opponent or each opponent, and then they untap under some clause, casting a monocolored spell, or instance or sorcery, or similar and similar, but each ping is going to be 4 or more damage thanks to Ojer, and thus they're huge outputs of damage from those. And our honorable mention before we get to the MVP of the deck is going to be Sulfuric Vortex, a card that says no one can gain life, and will ping everyone words are hard. Editor, leave this bit in. I want people to see just how hard content creation can be. I can't say words anymore. It stops people from gaining life, yourself included, and it pings everyone for 2 in the upkeep, or 4 if Ojer's in play. I need to stop saying or 4 if Ojer's in play, because that's the fucking purpose of the video. But lastly, as we come to the end of my list of tech that I'm including in my deck, I'm definitely fucking building this. It's gonna be so much fun to piss people off at the store with. It's gonna be Pyrohemia. Mana Bob's almost got this slot as MVP, and it might still teeter around. But anyway, fucking shut up, Mana Bobs. You're ready to Jay in the sun. Pyrohemia says at the beginning of the end step, if no creatures are on the battlefield, sacrifice Pyrohemia. Now, if we have an indestructible commander, or we just don't do 4 damage to him, he'll always be around to ensure that Pyrohemia is not sacked. And then for 1 red mana, we ping 1 damage to each creature and each player. It allows us to really burn down the board and damage up all the creatures too, but the main thing it does is it pings all the opponents for 1, which, yep, that's right. Come along, say it with me, everybody. Unless you have Ojer in play, and then it does 4. It really starts to ramp up with the Dragon Mantle, because if you dip 2 mana into Ojer, he goes to 6, and you dip 2 into this, you get 2 integers, which is 12. But if you put 2 Dragon Mantle plus 2, so 4 integers of this, 4 times 4 is 18. Actually, I think you're better off just dogging the damage into Pyrohemia over a Dragon Mantle. But what I guess Dragon Mantle does allow you to do with Pyrohemia is that each individual ping from Pyrohemia does more damage, and you can't do 4 pings with Pyrohemia because that would kill your commander. Obviously, he comes back into the land anyway, or back into your command zone, so either way, giving him the recursion element. But if he's going to be the one keeping Pyrohemia around, you don't want to activate Pyrohemia more than 4 times. So put all your excess mana into Dragon Mantle, and then ping the shit out of them 3 times with Pyrohemia, and then voila. Your opponent should be really pissed off with you or dead. Either way, you're the winner. I hope you've enjoyed this deck, Texas. Look at my first draft of the deck. Some cards might get cut. Young Peasy, for example, wasn't initially, but when I cut down my instants and sorceries and end up with loads of enchantments that do all the punishing stuff, I think he's an easy cut. Let me know if I've missed something key in the comment section below. Let me know if you're going a completely different route with Ojer. I guess the bad thing about this commander is that there's not really another option. The deepest might isn't that deep in terms of like options, I guess. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my Patreon in the links below, and I'll see you all soon. Ta-ta for now.